Hello, the Sports Hit List fans. My name is Ryan Wicken. I am the host of Dusting Off the Ropes here on the Sports Hit List YouTube channel, and I have a very special guest here today. He is a writer for PW Insider. He is my uncle, Mike Johnson. Mike, how are you doing here today?
I'm good, and I want the world to know I am not responsible for you being in love with pro wrestling. That had nothing to do with me.
He's
I'm
not.
I'm good. I'm good, Ryan. Listen, I'm very thankful and happy to be here. When you asked me, I was like, absolutely. And I don't do a lot of like podcasts and running around. I kind of try to keep myself PW Insider centric. But as I told you off the air, anytime you want me to come on and chat with you, I will absolutely do it because I know how passionate you are about the sport and this world that we all love, this wacky upside down world of pro wrestling. And I'm usually not the person being interviewed, so this is very new to me in some ways. So I'm very curious to see where we're going with this conversation. I'm very thankful that you asked me, and looking forward to doing it. So thanks.
Well, I wanted to have the interviewer become the interviewee, so it's great to have you on today. It's very interesting. I remember still hearing the first time, you with just hearing that you write for PW Insider, and I automatically connected the name, and I was like, no way. I was like, that's who Uncle Mike is. I was like, no way. And I was just like, oh my god. But we'll get into the questions here because we're going to be talking about your experience with PW Insider, but also your experience, before PW Insider and all that. So here we go. So my first question, I would like to take back to 2019. You had a pretty interesting interview in front of a live crowd at Starcast with none other than the best in the world, CM Punk. So when you were up there conducting the interview, speaking to CM Punk, speaking to the fans, what were you? Because you're usually not in front of fans. You're not in front of people. It's just you and the person you're talking to. So what was it
Mhm.
like to be in that situation?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Conrad Thompson, who runs Starcast, he had hired or brought in CM Punk to do the stage show, the interview, and Punk said, "Mike Johnson, I want Mike Johnson." So that's how I ended up there, which was a nice. Punk hadn't done anything in the wrestling space for many years. He had walked out of WWE in January 2019, January 2014. So now you're talking well over five and a half years since he's done anything pro wrestling related, and the fact that he wanted me because our past history and the fact that he felt I was fair, that was a huge compliment to me. But like you said, I don't do a lot of that stuff in front of a live crowd. Now I have done stuff where I've hosted panels at New York Comic Con. I've done some radio shows over the years. I used to co-host a show out of Boston called the Mouthpiece Wrestling Show at a good friend Sheldon Goldberg. So that live component, that stuff sort of prepared me for it. But it really was like, not only was it a live show, it was live on pay-per-view. So the same way I would watch WrestleMania back in the day as a kid, now I'm on pay-per-view with CM Punk, and it's live as it happens. So if I fall on my face, it's going to be on television, figuratively and literally. So the couple of things that I like tried to do is I knew I wanted to have a conversation with him, not just like, here's my list of questions and we're going to check things off. So I remember standing backstage and I didn't see him until about 30 seconds before we went out. And I was like, "Hey, how are you? What are we going to talk about?" And he literally said, he goes, "I don't know. We're just going to wing it." All right, we're going to wing it. So the funny part is, if you watch that show, when I walk out on stage, I have a piece of paper in my hand and I put it down. There's like a couple of chairs and like a table. And those are bullet points that if like I freeze or the conversation sucks, because you never know, we'll have something where I can look at and go, all right, oh, let's ask him about this, let's ask him about that, right? He comes out and he puts his hat right on top of the paper. I can't see anything.
You can't see me.
So unless I'm going to move the man's hat, I'm completely now just
You gotta
flying
wing it.
wild. Yeah, and we totally winged it for, I think it was like 2 hours, I think, or a little over 2 hours, maybe a little over 90 minutes. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I looked at the footage, but I was very lucky because that the crowd in that building in Chicago that day, they were there to have a good time and they were happy, so they were very receptive. to even like an opening joke of like, oh, by the way, he's not here, guys.
So, CM Punk canceled. I'm sorry. I'm just kidding.
But he was very open. And if you watch that interview, the one piece of criticism that I did receive on it is in the beginning, we're talking not about wrestling, but about him doing some acting, because he had just done Girl on the Third Floor, which was a horror film. You can probably find it on Netflix or another streaming service. And then we kind of dovetail into life and pro wrestling and things like that. And the reason I did that was it was the first time he had done anything in a long time. So why not talk to him about stuff that he's doing in the moment right now, just to get him a little bit more comfortable and get him into a conversational mode. That way it's not, I hate everything. I don't like pro wrestling. I had to walk away from it. And my whole goal was to make people feel like CM Punk and I were just sitting at a restaurant somewhere and we were just having a conversation. And the other thing I remember is like, he was telling the story about The Rock trying to call him one night when Rock was in the ring, I think in Los Angeles.
I remember
and
that.
Punk couldn't pick up the phone because he was walking his dog and he was in an elevator, and he made a comment like, made me feel bad that I was like a dick to The Rock. Sorry for my language. And I immediately was just not even thinking. I'm like, well, why were you a D word to The Rock? And I hear the whole crowd go, ooh. And I'm like, he said it, not me. Like, I'm not trying to attack the man, but you opened the door. I want to know why you did that. And I think everybody else would. And yeah. And so like he told a lot of good stories. And I remember like there were people there who I'm friends with and who I care about their opinions. And they can be very harsh at times and very honest. I remember coming off the stage and going backstage, and one of them was standing in the backstage waiting. And I was like, how was it? And they were like, it was awesome. And if they said that, I knew it was at least good enough that I would be happy with it. And I remember a friend of mine who's since passed away, Blackjack Brown, who's this great wrestling writer, photographer. He was there when he showed up backstage afterwards, just had this big giant grin on his face. And he was so excited. And I knew if he liked it, given he'd done all these things all over the world, that it had to have been good. And it just, I'm sure if we can go back to it, like you can go back with like and comb through and be like, oh, maybe you should have asked this, or maybe you didn't ask that. But when you're live in the moment, like just like we're live now, like the conversation will go to the left, it'll go to the right, and then if you can, you try to bring it back into where you want it. But nothing ever happens in real life the way you plan out, no matter how meticulously you plan out anything. That's not how life works, and that certainly wasn't how that interview worked. And I'm just proud that people still talk about it. I saw a couple of weeks ago, somebody made a YouTube video, and it was animated of CM Punk telling a story about Tony Atlas while he was at Ohio Valley Wrestling, and they animated it to look like CM Punk was telling the story in a stand-up club, like he was a stand-up comedian. And I was like, man, people are so creative. Like, I would never think of that. And I'm just happy that it's lived on. And I'm happy that, anytime I've been on stage for StarCast, and whether I've interviewed a CM Punk or Rob Van Dam or Lita or whoever, it's always been a good conversation, and people have been happy with it. And the subjects of those conversations have been happy with it. Because the last thing you want to do is waste their time, and more importantly than even them, waste the time of an audience that's paying to be entertained and paying to enjoy a conversation with someone that they care about.
It looked like he was happy with that interview. It looked like he was comfortable. It looked like he was having a great time answering your questions and just talking about not just professional wrestling, but life. And it was a great interview. And I was glad to know that the person who got to interview him was my uncle. And I was like, you see this? You see that guy? You see that guy who's sitting next to CM Punk on stage in front of all those Chicago fans? That's my uncle. I'm like, oh my God. But yeah,
thank you. If you liked it, that means if you liked it, hopefully it means a lot of other people liked it.
It was a great interview. So, and I think everybody, at least most people that I talked to, loved it. So it was a great interview. And if you did not check it out, make sure to check it out. StarCast 2019. And it's called, I believe, just CM Punk Best in the World. Going to my next question now. There was a documentary that was released on A&E, a Stone Cold biography.
What?
You actually got to be a part of it. And I remember seeing you, and you get to talk about his career, his life. So just seeing that biography, what did it mean to you to be in a biography, especially with somebody with the name of Stone Cold Steve Austin, one of the best professional wrestlers of
That
all time?
Oh yeah, I mean he's on the Mount Rushmore, I think, for everybody who ever loved pro wrestling, right? Like he that entire time period, he defined it. That was an interesting one. Like I got the email and from the director, I think Jake Rogan was his name, and I wrote him back. I was like, "Are you sure you're emailing the right person?" He's like, "Absolutely." So the that they had come to me, the production company. It was just, and it was cool about that is it was the same production company and producer who did the Michael Jordan The Last Dance documentary on
Oh,
Netflix. So it's the
really?
same crew, same people, which is kind of cool because I'm not the biggest sports guy, but everyone watched that documentary, and that's a phenomenal film or series or whatever you want to call it. And so it was cool. And the only unfortunate part of it was during the pandemic, so we had to film outdoors,
Yes, I remember
and
seeing
like we
that.
had to like keep distance from each other and things like that. But like I was really like I didn't like I was the very first person that they interviewed. Like they interviewed me for a couple of hours, and then like they went to Mick Foley's house in Long Island where Mick lived at the time afterwards.
Yeah.
And Jake had told me at one point, like, "Oh, your interview is kind of like the spine, and everything else is getting built around it. So even if you get edited out, the story that we tell is basically in part patterned by the story that you told in the interview," which was a nice compliment. You know, I got to tell you, I was in it far more than I expected because to me, if you've got a Kevin Owens and a Rock and a whoever who are WWE talents, they are more likely to be the people that the audience will want to see, other than me, obviously. And so you expect they're going to be in more. So I was in there a lot more than I expected, but it was cool for me on a personal level because a lot of the things that I talked about were the things that went on very early on in his career, and that's all stuff that I watched growing up. And I like Texas wrestling and Memphis wrestling, which the USWA was a big part of both. Those are things that I truly loved as a fan growing up. I loved the Von Erichs, I loved Jerry Lawler, Superstar Bill Dundee, Tommy Rich and Austin Idol against Jerry Lawler, like all that stuff. That's the first place I saw Mick Foley was CWA Wrestling at the time, which was what Memphis was called at the time. Like, so I really love and I'm passionate about a lot of that stuff from those old territories. So to have the chance to talk about it and then little snippets of it be on A&E is kind of cool. I get stopped more often when I'm not at shows and I'm just wandering around the world and someone will stop me and say, "Weren't you in that Steve Austin thing?" It happens all the time.
Really?
And so yeah, well, they replay it all the time. So there's always going to be new people who end up seeing it.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud that I was on the first ever episode. And that was the highest rated episode they ever did. They did like over 1 million people. So a lot of people have seen that thing over the last, I think it's like 3 or 4 years since it originally debuted. So it was like it was nice to have the opportunity to speak about it. I still to this day have no idea why they picked me. I was told that day like Steve Austin signed off on it, but I've never had a conversation with the man about it, so I have no idea whether that's actually true or not. But I was very thankful to be in it. They've never asked me back, so I don't know if I just didn't do a great job or not. But I remember like that first season, I was like, they did a Roddy Piper one too, and I was like, oh, I would have loved to have been in the Roddy Piper one. But Steve Austin's like one of those shining stars of professional wrestling, of someone who had this great work ethic and this great grit and went through all these different permutations from the early days where it was him and Tony Adams against Chris Adams and Jeannie Clark, and then going from there to him as the WCW World Television Champion, to part of being the Dangerous Alliance with Paul Heyman, to going to ECW as Superstar Steve Austin, and then going to be the Ringmaster, which we don't like to forget, and then doing the whole takeoff on the serial killer as Stone Cold Steve Austin with that sort of personality, and then it blows up from there. And by '97, he's winning the WWF title from Shawn Michaels in Boston, and then they're off like a rocket. And when people they're it's crazy to think about how long ago that was, because that period was so vibrant and so fun. And there are indelible memories that people have. And as they get older, they're always going to be nostalgic to look back on what they cared about when they were young and what they loved when they were young. And I think that's the real secret to why that biography has kind of continued to have a life. Because when people think of Steve Austin, I think most fans go, I remember when he did this to The Rock, or he did this to Goldust, or he fought this guy at WrestleMania, or he stunned this guy. And there's sort of that surge of happiness and nostalgia and energy And he, no matter what, he's going to always be one of the top 1% of professional wrestling performers of all time. I'm just very thankful I got to be in that for a small little piece of it. And what was cool for me was, as a big movie fan, which is one of my passions, they actually played the world premiere of it was actually at a drive-in in Pennsylvania. So getting to go there to the drive-in and watch it with like a couple hundred cars full of crazy wrestling fans who are all honking their horns, because again, it's the middle of the pandemic, no one's really hanging out with each other.
Yeah.
And like seeing myself pop up on that screen and going, oh geez, wow. Well, I guess the front of my house is on TV now. Like it was like it was kind of cool, and it's like one of those cool life experiences that wrestling kind of bestowed on me. And I've been very lucky where this is just something I cared about from when I was like 10, 12 years old, and just keeps dropping little blessings and keeps dropping little things that keep me very, very surprised and very, very honored and very humbled. Like even doing this, like, getting the chance to sit here and talk with you, it's a cool, humbling experience. Like you can't lose sight of the fact that you loved pro wrestling so much, and you watch it for the first time and you see Roddy Piper yelling at Mr. T and you're like, what is this? And being enamored with it, and then getting to write about it and be around it and build relationships with companies and with people, and to be able to make a living doing it, and pay my house off doing it, and travel the country doing it. Like it's one of those blessings that you can't lose sight of, because the second you do, karma's going to come back and smack you in the mouth and take it all away. So I'm very thankful. And the Austin thing, like I'll always be on that in that project, right? They're never going to take me out. It's years later. So the fact that it still airs in perpetuity on A&E, and it got released on a DVD, and it's streaming all over the world. Like I had a reader once send me, I guess it was either from France or from Canada, where like it had been syndicated internationally, and maybe it was French, maybe it was German, I don't remember. But like seeing myself, but it's not my voice, it's someone translating me into German or French, whatever it was. It was like the weirdest experience. Like, like, oh, this is me. And they're speaking in another country. And then I hear USWA, because they're obviously talking about Memphis at the time. And it's like, oh, okay. So this is what it's like for actors when their stuff is sent to other countries and they're completely voiced over. So it's like one of those weird, wacky life experiences that I'll always appreciate.
Especially when it's getting like 1 million views. That means 1 million people saw your face. So it's just like, but also they probably, especially if you're a professional wrestling fan, I'm sure most people have, read something that comes from PW Insider, and they recognize the name of Mike Johnson. And then once they see that that's you, they're like, well, I've known that name for a long time because I've read the articles and read the stories of Mike Johnson. Now that I can connect the two of a face and a name, now they're going to recognize you. Because I'm sure a lot of people, when they see a story,
it would have been better.
When they see a story of like, something going on in WWE or just professional wrestling in general, usually most of the time, if they're reading from PW Insider, they see your name and you're like, well, let's, I never see what he looks like. Let's see what he looks like. Or they might just watch the biography and be like, connected the two. There's a lot of times where I just like, I know the name of a person.
And then they were very disappointed. I think it's similar to almost like radio back in the day, where not to age myself, like you would hear the morning DJ all the time. So to you they were kind of your friend. They were the voice in your ear.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the role that a lot of people who are online, who are either influencers, which is a weird culture, or even people who write consistently. I think it's, or someone like me who does the podcasting for our elite subscribers, like we become sort of like that trusted ear, and sort of like that sort of constant companion. Like we kind of end up like the R2D2 to their Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Like we're just sort of always there, and hopefully helping them in ways that we will never even know, just by doing our jobs. And like during the pandemic, that was a big thing. Like I couldn't go anywhere, couldn't go to shows. Pandemic begins. I'm like, oh, that's the end of this job. How am I ever going to go to work again? How are these guys and girls ever going to wrestle again? Like it was a very, very scary time. So like one of the things that I did is like I dove into doing a lot of interviews and trying to create a lot of content so that we could at least feel like we were there for people and help them get through the day and the world and the stress with something other than heavy drinking. It was like just wanted to be there for people, and by doing that, they got to be there for us as well. So it's a very unique sort of 21st century relationship that I get to have with a lot of people who care about what I write about or what I discuss. And these, I'm lucky because these are things I would want to talk about and write about anyway, because I was doing it well before this was my full-time job, and because I love pro wrestling and I love the people involved, and always enjoyed it. So, but yeah, that Steve Austin one, that's going to be one that is going to live on from perpetuity. And like when I'm 80, I'll be able to go back and watch that and go, I remember when, and they came and they talked about good old Steve Austin, like he's one of the best of all time. Like there's no doubt about it. And being invited by Jake Rogel and that production team was, because I don't even think WWE knew that I did the interview. It was like the release I signed was for the production company. It wasn't for WWE. So I don't even know that WWE knew that I was in it until they saw the final copy. Maybe that's why I'm not in the other ones. They're like, hey, we cannot have this guy in there. I don't know, but I'm glad I got to be in the one that was, up till this point, as we're talking, the most successful one they've ever produced. And, we talk about 1 million people watched it. Who knows how many people watched it around the world, and who knows how many people watched it via the replays. So, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, I don't know, but it's a great compliment to be part of that, to be part of the process of making it, and to be included in it as much as I was. And they can't take it away. And, it's like the CM Punk thing. Can't take it away. It was a nice milestone for myself personally. It was a nice compliment to myself and PWInsider.com. And I'm proud that I got to be part of it. And if they ever want me again, they obviously know where to find me and where I live.
Let's go, because you mentioned it before. Blackjack Brown. You got in 2022 a Lifetime Achievement Award. That was named after Blackjack Brown, for quote, demonstrating, and this is on PWInsider.com, demonstrating excellence in journalism and continued passion in reporting and covering professional wrestling. So just hearing that, what that award is for, and also knowing that you were friends with Blackjack Brown, what did that award mean to you?
A lot. So when Blackjack passed, July 2022, it was completely unexpected. And that was a huge shot to my gut, of just my morale, because he was one of my favorite people in the world to speak to, always made me laugh. And I was coming through a time period where just a couple of months before I had lost my mom, which was awful. As it would be for anybody in that situation. And, he was one of the only person who could make me laugh coming out of that was Blackjack. And he was someone that was always around pro wrestling. He wrote articles for programs for Madison Square Garden for the WWF, and for George Napolitano, who's another famous wrestling magazine writer, publisher, and photographer, and had a ongoing column for years in the Chicago Sun-Times, and was at ECW and WCW and WWF and shooting photos ringside, inside the rails, and had a 900 line that people called, and I'm sure lots of kids got in trouble calling it to find out what happened backstage at Raw that week.
Yeah.
But he always had like just this great passion for professional wrestling, and his great passion for life. And he was one of the people that I personally looked up to, and I personally loved with all my heart. So when he passed away, I was completely shattered and brokenhearted. So that night, I did not know that award existed. I went to that show that night. It was in New Jersey, because Mike Bucci, who performed as Nova in ECW and Simon Dean in WWE, was officially retiring from the ring. And I've known Mike since 1994. He was an independent guy wrestling a very early match for a promoter named Dino Sano, a Worldwide Wrestling Alliance in Linden, New Jersey. And I went to that show because the main event of the show was, listen to this one, Abdullah the Butcher versus Nails, which I don't think ever happened again. Yeah, I don't have footage, but I've got photos. It was crazy. And he was in one of the opening matches, and I was in the front row just as a fan. I made some crack, and he cracked back at me. And then when the intermission happened that night, he walked up to me. He was selling pictures or whatever to kids of him and his character at the time, Supernova. And he's like, hey, I'm Mike. And I was like, hey, I'm Mike. And we ended up talking, exchanging numbers, and from that point on, like our journeys in wrestling were kind of the very similar, where we kind of leveled up a little bit to different places and remained friends. And he's one of the few people in life that I know who's remained the same person from the first day I met him to today, many years later in 2024. So I went to that show. He and his brother, his twin brother Donnie B, had promoted it. I knew it was going to be his last match, so I had gone to that show just out of respect to him because I wanted to see his last match, be there for him as his friend. And they had some presentations that they were doing, and then out of nowhere, they talk about this writer, and I'm kind of half paying attention because I'm speaking to my friend. And then they put up a video of Bill Apter, legendary writer, photographer in his own right, wrote for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and was the heart and soul of those magazines, in my opinion, for many, many years. And they're talking about me, and I was like, what in the world is going on here? And then when I got in the ring, which I never like to do out of respect to the talents, when they pulled it out, I saw a picture of myself and Blackjack Brown. I almost lost it right there, and I'll do my best not to lose it here. But knowing that they had gone to Blackjack's family and said, we'd like to do this, and they approved it, that means the world to me. Like, I don't need accolades. I don't need Hall of Fames. I don't need anyone to tell me, oh, I'm great. I don't need that. The fact that that was given to me and was something that was approved by Blackjack's family, I know, having seen that man smile when he was with us, that he had the biggest beaming smile of anybody in the entire universe that night, wherever he was, whatever plane of existence he was on. And the fact that it made him happy is something I'll always hold like in my heart. And when I'm down and I'm sad, I'll know that my name is forever connected to his. And who knows if someone gets to be bestowed that award again. Let's be honest. This was not like, the Academy of Professional Wrestling giving it to me. It was a group of people who thought highly of me, and it means the world to me. But I'm lucky enough to do this for my job, right? I get to pay my bills with this. I get to live my life with this. I get to travel all over the world. I've met everyone I've ever wanted to meet in professional wrestling. I've interviewed 99% of them. I get to get up every day and be happy that I have a job that I love. I get to write about things and hopefully help people through writing about them, whether it's making them happy or saying, hey, this talent's really, really good and people should pay attention to them. And maybe they end up getting a tryout or a job. Like Drew McIntyre talked about that, where I had written an article about he was about to go out back on the free market after his TNA deal expired. And he's told the story, not even in interviews with me, but in interviews with other people about that article. William Regal saw it and put it under Triple H's nose and Triple H's desk. And that kind of began the wheels turning for Drew McIntyre to go back to WWE. So if I hadn't written that article, would he have gone back to WWE at some point? Absolutely. Dude's phenomenal. Like, everyone's watching him now and going, Jesus Christ, he's killing everybody on Twitter. He's great at what he does. But the fact that I was able to kind of put a spotlight on that and say, hey, don't forget about this guy. This guy's really good. And that kind of helped change the story of his life just a little bit. And maybe it got him to the WWE Championship a little bit faster. Like, those are all small compliments that I'll take to heart and I'll always be very proud of. But other than my family and other than the fact that I get to do something that I really love every day when I get up, and it really is the difference between, I got to go to work and, all right, let's see what's on the email today. And see what phone calls and text messages came in overnight, because wrestlers are nocturnal animals. Like, it's nothing for them to call at 4:30 in the morning and be like, I'm really mad about this, and want to rant for 2 hours on the phone. But the fact that my name is connected to Blackjacks, and the fact that award was given to me, and they legitimately gobsmacked me, and to this day, I still don't remember what I said afterwards. Other than I probably just paid tribute to Blackjack. It is such a huge honor. And that is something I will keep with me for the rest of my life. And I'm not one to boast or brag, but that one I will always keep like right here. On my worst day, that is something, and that is a memory, just like the memory of Blackjack in general, is something that will raise me up a little bit or keep me a little bit happier or pull me a little bit out of sadness if I'm in that sad place. So that was one of the happiest moments of my wrestling journey. I just wish I had known so that people that I cared about from outside of wrestling could have been there to enjoy the moment with me. Because I have friends who to this day still don't understand why I care about any of this. They understand it's my job, but they'll watch it and be like, I don't understand why they went into the ropes and then they bounce back. Like, as wrestling fans, we take that stuff and we go, oh, yeah, it's fine. But for someone who's outside of that sphere, they're sort of like, huh, what is going on here? And they kind of tilt their head like Scooby-Doo a little bit, like when the bad guy shows up, like, huh? Like, but that's kind of like the difference between the wrestling people and the people that don't love wrestling. If you love wrestling, you get it. If you don't love wrestling, no one's ever going to be able to break it down to you. I would have liked to have been able to invite some people from outside of the wrestling circle to be able to have that moment with me, because it meant a lot to me. Like, my brother was there with me. He doesn't go to a lot of shows. He just happened to come with me that night because it was my friend's retirement match. I was like, oh, you should come. This is going to be a fun show. And like, I had a lot of other friends that were there, and it was a cool moment. And that plaque hangs very proudly in my office. I'm very, very happy and very touched by it. And I'll just say thank you to Mike and Donnie Bucci for making that moment happen. And eternal thanks to Blackjack Brown and his family. It's impossible to define and truly explain how much that guy meant to me, and how much that award meant to me. So very proud of it. And I'm like, it's one of those things that, like, it grounds you and keeps you tethered and keeps you humbled. And I hope that I'm always that tethered and humbled, and I'm not like off in La La Land thinking I'm way too important or too cool for school, because no one ever is.
Definitely. I think that's very well said, and I think he's very Blackjack Brown is very happy that you got that award, and I think it's a great award to have, and he'll always be with you, Mike.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
One last question I have, and this is a question for anybody who wants to be a writer. Um, do you have, because there's a lot of people in the program we have here at my college, of people who like to write and write about stories and write about current events. So do you have any advice for anybody who wants to be a writer or a journalist?
Yes. Know that you are going to spend a lot of time never knowing how good or bad your stuff is, because most of the feedback you're going to get is very critical. um that's number one. So you got to have a thick skin. It is not like, you cannot just be like, oh, this person hated it, so I'm going to be terrible, like, I must be awful. You're going to get a lot more critical feedback than positive feedback. And that still to this day, I'll write articles that I'm proud of, and I'll look at an email the next day and it's like crickets. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't that good, but then sometimes you click on something, or you hit on something and a lot of people respond, and sometimes it's good or bad. For me, where I found what worked for me is, you just got to write. And even if it's, you're writing poetry, or you're chasing a story, or you're writing a short story for yourself, or you're writing about something that you're passionate about, you just have to do it. The more hours you put into something, the better you're going to be, the more you're going to find your rhythm. I was very lucky. I can remember the exact moment. I was like in third or fourth grade, and I knew for whatever reason I had a knack for writing. I don't even know why I have it, but I remember like just getting this assignment, and it was like a creative story, and it had to do whatever 500, 1,000 words, whatever it was, probably not that many at fourth grade. And I realized that the more descriptive I got, the more words I would burn out, and I'd be able to be done with this a lot quicker. And for whatever reason, I always knew that something that I was going to do in life had to do with writing. I'm very good at being able to make words tap dance for whatever reason. I'm more eloquent when I type than I ever am when I speak. And I can see sentences in my mind emblazoned in front of me before I've even typed them. And in fact, sometimes when I go back, I'm like, oh, I forgot like 3 words because I'm typing so fast, and I have to go back and add and fix it up, because no one will be able to understand what I'm writing except for me until it's edited. But it's just, you got to do the process. And unfortunately, especially now, the world has changed with the internet. There is not a lot of money in this early on. And you got to understand that if this is something you're really passionate about, you're probably going to put a lot of time and emotional effort into it and not see a lot of financial rewards. I started writing about wrestling in the beginning of 1996. I didn't see one penny until maybe 2000. And then it didn't become my full-time job until January of 2004. So, and even with that, I was like, I'm going to give myself a year to see if this works. And if not, then I'm going to have to just slink off into the darkness and go find some 9 to 5 job working somewhere. And thankfully for me, it worked out. And thankfully it's hello, everybody listening. Hopefully it still works out. Because you never know. But I think a lot of it really has to do with repetition and trying to do as much as you can, maybe take as many courses as you can, and don't limit yourself to one thing. Like I write about wrestling, but I read a lot of books about film. I read a lot of books about documentaries. I watch a lot of documentaries that have nothing to do with professional wrestling. I read a lot of science fiction, and a lot of that is to keep the brain fresh and to find inspiration in other things. Like I find a lot of inspiration in everything in life connecting to Star Wars in some way, because I love Star Wars, because it was something I cared about when I was 3 years old, and I still care about it today. So you want to find things that you connect to and write about them in a way that someone else can connect. And I think especially when you're writing about wrestling, so many people get caught up in the idea of, oh, there's this sort of inner circle and all these words like heel and face, and you write something knowing that it's for you, but sometimes you got to remember someone might be looking at this for the first time. They're not going to be able to understand it. It's like reading Martian. So I try to write my stuff where with the idea that anybody can dive in and read it and kind of understand what I'm talking about. And I think that's important too, as a writer, is to always remember that, especially if you're writing about something else. Like creative writing is a different animal, but if you're writing about something from a factual standpoint or a journalism standpoint, you have to remember your opinion is not the story. The facts of the story are the story. And just because you, as the writer, know something doesn't mean your reader knows something. So you have to write it in a way that anybody can look at it, pick it up, and know the who, what, why, where, and how of that story. And I think, those are basic building blocks, but they work for a reason. And, I could write about you, Ryan. I could tell all sorts of stories about you, but it mightn't be stuff that you would understand, that I would understand, your family would understand, and our extended family would know about. But if someone's coming cold and they pick up an article or they pick up a newspaper or they click on a website and here's the story of Ryan, and it's all inside jokes and all things that we would understand, are they going to come away with more of an understanding of who Ryan the person is and why Ryan is important? Probably not. So you have to remember to pull back and make it something for the overall audience, not just for a smaller piece of the pie. Listen, man, there are days where I've got stuff to do and I've got articles to write and I've got stories I'm trying to chase, and I just can't crack it creatively. Like I can't get the brain going. I can't find the right connection for the article. I can't find the right angle, so to speak, for it. And it'll happen. And I'll spend all day frustrated because I know I want to get it out and I just can't get it out. And I'll go to bed. And this happens all the time. I'll wake up and it'll be 3:12 in the morning. I got it. And I got to run downstairs to my office and I'm writing for 3 hours. And now I've completely ruined my sleep and I'm wiped out for the next day. But I got what I needed out. And sometimes you can't control that process. It's not a 9 to 5 job. Writing grabs you and it holds on to you, and you're sort of lost in that process even when you're not writing, because your brain is always percolating, trying to figure out what's the next thing. How do I solve this puzzle? How do I connect these things together? What's the source that I need? What's the fact that I'm missing? And there are times where and I hate this about myself, and I'll say it because I say it to my friends privately, where I'm someplace physically, but mentally I'm not there in the moment because my brain, I'm typing in my head. And that's something I struggle with sometimes, because you can't allow yourself to be controlled by this crazy demon. But if you're passionate about it, sometimes it's the only way you can kind of have your soul sort of satiated, is to write something that you're proud of. The downside to that is, and this is the other piece of advice, the second you're proud of something, then it's like, oh, I got to do something else to match or surpass that. And so you're always like, it's like the old Greek myth, you're Hercules trying to roll the boulder up the mountain, and it keeps coming back down. You never get to the top of that mountain. And it drives you crazy as a writer. Like I can tell you right now, there's not one piece of article, not one piece of writing that I've ever written that I'm 100% proud of and happy with. Because I will go back and look at it 3 days later, 6 weeks later, 5 years later, go, I could make this better, but it's already published. There's nothing you can really do about it. You know, and I feel bad for authors because once that sucker's binded in a book and released, I'm sure they have those moments where it's like, oh, if I had just thought about this for this character, or if I had just connected this, but it's out there in the world, you know, and once it's out there, it doesn't even belong to you anymore. It belongs to the person who's reading it, and it's defined by how they receive it. And you know, it's one of those that this crazy mental and emotional churn that you have as a writer. But yeah, my advice to everybody, to get back to your question, you just have to do it. You have to just take an hour. Take an hour, turn off your phone, and force yourself to just sit and write. Whether it's a journal, whether it's you're writing a movie review about or you're writing a story about what happened to you, or something creative that you know about a Martian who went to the circus. Just write something, and just the repetition, right? If you were going to swim, right, you wanted to be an Olympic swimmer, what are you going to do? You're going to get in the pool and you're going to do laps back and forth, back and forth. That's what you have to do as a writer. You have to do your laps. You have to do your reps. And my advice too is if you're writing about baseball, go read about Saturday Night Live. Go read about production. Go read about all these things, because it'll bring you a different insight into baseball or into wrestling or into Star Trek or whatever. Anything that you can do to enlighten yourself that will help inspire you to write about the things that you care about will make you a better writer, will make you a better creative soul. And that's what it's all about. Just trying to continue to find a way to express yourself in a creative way and in a way that you're proud of. But know that even if you get that sort of creative and personal satisfaction, it will be fleeting, because you're going to want to do the next thing. And that satisfaction sometimes has nothing to do with being financially rewarded for your work, because nobody gets paid as much as they believe they are worth, and probably no one gets as much out of what they put in as they put in. Because there are days I'll work a 20-hour schedule. There are days I'll work 7 hours. There are days where my day is just chasing stories and I'm on the phone while I'm traveling somewhere. And there are days where I'm strapped to the computer, like I'm chained to it, because I just got to get work done. And there's stories happening and there's so much chaos. Like WrestleMania week. The only thing I keep track of WrestleMania week when I go is how much sleep I get. And I can tell you this week, I got there Wednesday. I got a full night of sleep because I knew once the chaos began, it was over for me. Thursday into Friday, 3 hours of sleep. And then I got to get up and have a whole day. Friday into Saturday, 4 hours of sleep. Saturday into Sunday, I got 5.5 or 6. Like, and then you just have to get through it. You have to make it happen. Mick Foley had this one line that I always loved in his first book, where he said, sometimes things have to be done for the sake of history. And that's kind of how I feel about the job. Like, sometimes you just have to grin and bear it and burn through it, because if not, if you don't do it, who's going to do it as a writer? No one's going to write the story that you want to write except you. If you have a great idea, do it and work on it and make it happen, because if you wait too long, someone else is going to have that same idea and they're going to be able to work on it. And then you're just going to sit there and go, oh man, maybe I could have been the one doing that. You got to just get in there. You got to be in the race in order to win. And it is not easy. But in the moments where it's rewarding, there's nothing better than that moment. So that's my advice to anybody. Put passion first, hope the money comes later, and just keep chipping away at the stone, and eventually you'll crack it.
There is definitely things that I've made, like if it's not writing, but it's like stuff I made, like something in like a video game or something that I post on my Instagram, and at that moment I'll think it's like, oh, it's really good, I love it, everything is good. It looks like, especially when I make like wrestlers in the WWE video game, I think they look exactly like who they are in real life, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And then I look back at it maybe a couple days later, I'm like, well, maybe I should have I could have done this better with the attire. I could have done this better with the face scan.
If I could just tweak it a little bit
just
more.
a little bit more. But the thing is, nothing is perfect. Everything could be improved. Everything could be better. And that's what, and everything, and there's video games out there where, just like you were saying with the book, where they can make something with a character and complete the game, complete production of it, release the game, and then realize where they're going with the game, with story wise, they screwed up something and now have to figure out a way to make it all make sense in the end of it.
Listen, how many video games do we buy for PlayStation or Xbox or whatever, or to download? And there's 5,000 fixes and updates in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's ever perfect. And like that's why, like, I love Star Wars, man. That original version of Star Wars, the first movie that I saw as a kid, that's the definitive version. But if you guess George Lucas, he's still, he's changed that thing a million times.
Yes.
And to me, it's blasphemous, but to him, it's just not good enough. And I, while I don't agree with him because I think that's a perfect movie, that first version, to him, it's something that could be a little bit better. And he's probably to this day still not satisfied with those films. And I get it. I get it from a writer's perspective. It is not easy. You're chasing something that you're never going to catch. And if you catch it, it's out of your fingers immediately and you're back to chasing it again and trying to do it better. It's a rough, listen, when I say it's a rough gig, it's not that I'm complaining about it, but when you hold yourself to a standard and you want to be great at what you do and you want to be satisfied with what you do, sometimes it can be rough. Sometimes you're critical of yourself, and sometimes you second guess yourself. And I think that's just part of the creative process. That's why sometimes it's good to have an editor look at it and have an outside perspective, because maybe they'll shine a light on something that you're just not seeing. Like, that's the solution. Each instance is different, and you have to. There's no algorithm for creative writing, no matter what they tell you. You have to find that spark and make it work for yourself, and then from there it cascades over to the next thing, and to the next thing. And it is not easy, but it's rewarding. In the moment, it's rewarding, and then you go, I got to top that CM Punk interview. How am I doing that? It's like, that's the first thing you asked me about. Why? Because people loved it. How do I top that? I don't know. I have no idea. And I feel the same way about articles, especially when I do deep dive articles. Like, I'll be satisfied with it, and then it's like, all right, what do you do next? How do you match it, much less surpass it, if you are indeed happy with it? Because there are times I'll write something and I'll be like, I nailed that sucker. And then I'll go look at it 7-8 hours later, and I'll be like, man, if I just added 2 more paragraphs to this, I could have nailed this point so much better. But then it's like, are you going to write 10,000 words? Like, it all depends on the situation. So, but my advice is turn off your phone and force yourself to write for at least an hour a day.
Thank you to Mike Johnson from PW Insider for being on today's episode. I appreciate your time, taking time out of your day for this interview, and I will definitely, I'll definitely want to have you back on, because again, very interesting and very cool stuff that you've shared with us today. And I always love talking to you, so I can't wait to do it again someday.
Happy to do it. And, if anybody wants to check us out at pwinsider.com, we've been around since 2004, myself and Dave Scherer. And we like to think we're the best pro wrestling website in the world. Please feel free to check it out yourselves and make your own decisions and determinations. But I can guarantee you that if you care about pro wrestling as much as Ryan does, we're going to have a lot of stories pretty much every day, and a lot of content and a lot of long form discussions. And hope you check us out sometime. And even if you don't, I hope that if like I said, if one person gets anything out of this, it's just, spend time on your writing, spend time on what you're passionate about, and try to figure out ways to diversify and use things in other realms that will inspire you to write and create in the realm that you love, because it's all interconnected. It's all one big symbiotic relationship from one thing to the other. And just because you like hockey doesn't mean you can't learn from basketball, doesn't mean you can't learn from Star Wars, since I pull everything back to Star Wars. Like, there's always something from one thing you can take to learn from another. So, and just do the laps, do the reps, and hopefully it'll work out for itself over time. And, just put your passion first. And I think you'll be very happy with the end results. And just as I was happy with the end results of sitting down with my nephew, Ryan. And I appreciate you, sir. Thanks for thinking of me and wanting me to do it. And like I said, it'd be my pleasure to come back anytime I can help you out or help anybody else in the class out.
Thank you for wanting to be on. And we have a group at the college, we just talk about professional wrestling. We very much appreciate it, and I think everybody at the college, just because also you were talking about writing, I think everybody at the college appreciates your time, but also your advice, and just talking about just what it is to be a writer, and I think everybody will enjoy your advice and take that advice into consideration. And again, everybody, make sure to check out PW Insider for wrestling news, stories, and you were saying you have like an elite subscription, $8.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that. We have a, thank you for even bringing it up. We have an ad-free version of the site, and with that you get the entire website completely ad-free. Sorry, we have ads, but we have bills to pay, just like everybody else does. And with that, you get like a number of exclusive articles every week with breaking news, and you get all of our podcasts are exclusively behind our paywall. So you'll get all our long-form conversations, just like Ryan and I just had a long conversation, and you'll get interviews and everyone from WWE stars to Hall of Fame talents to independent stars making their way to promoters to other people who write about wrestling, like different authors who work on books, and lots of post-game shows discussing what happened on the latest WWE or AEW television show or pay-per-view spectacle and things of that nature. So there's thousands and thousands of hours going back 20 years on there. So there's a lot. So yeah, feel free to check it out if you would like.
Definitely check it out. And that is it for today's episode of Dusting Off the Ropes here on the Sports Hit List. Again, thank you to Mike Johnson for today's episode. Again, check him out and check PW Insider out. I'm your host, Ryan Whitkin. That is my guest, Mike Johnson. I'm pointing to the right. I know you can't see me right now, Mike, but I'm pointing to you.
I feel like I'm in the Brady Bunch. Well, thank you for pointing at me, Reverend Ryan, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. And again, like this video and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next one.